So welcome back to the Hearth. And I'm here with Kristin, Eileen, and Alison. We're going to be talking about a topic that we all are very interested in called working with resistance. So I'm wondering, Alison, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Um, One of the things that I have noticed in working with resistance is it's very hard to confront it straight on because it will resist even more, in oneself and then in working with another person. So I like to work with it somatically. Like when I'm working with someone and I notice they're in resistance, there's like an energetic clutching that goes on. Um, and I'll bring their attention to that. Like, how is that supporting them? What do they experience with that clutching? Does it give them a sense of self? And then I'll start asking questions like, do you feel connected with what's around you or with me as you clutch? Like, what's your experience? Does it separate you? Does it connect you? Usually it's isolating and it's an attempt to have like some sense of self in a moment where someone needs to defend themselves or feel as if they're losing a sense of themselves, um, feeling overwhelmed. So I try and orient the person somatically. And then I invite them, instead of hardening up against this place and clutching up against it, um, I invite them to really feel where they're sitting, orient to the space around them, invite them to really be in their present age, present time, adult self, and then to soften into whatever it is, to be curious about what is it they're maybe defending against, what are they resisting against. Does in doing this could block the energy flow in their body. So what would it be like to soften into, even if the flow is just a trickle of energy, to put their attention on that life enhancing trickle rather than sensing themselves through that clutching experience and that tightening experience. Um, and then I invite them just to soften a little bit and then notice what that feels like. Take it a step at a time and then soften again and notice what that feels like. Um, and that it's a very different orientation to soften into what is with support rather than separating themselves and tightening up against it to get a sense of themselves. Um, and so in that process, just the softening part, energy starts to move. Sometimes feelings start to come up that they're afraid of. We can take a pause any moment with whatever feelings are coming up and explore them. But it creates safety to just take it a little step at a time, to titrate into whatever they're resisting rather than trying to confront it head on and talk about it directly. Sometimes that just activates the survival mechanism to resist even more. Um, that's one of the approaches I use with resistance.
Well, I like resistance. So what I've learned from Anna Chitty is to ask what's right about it, what's
Mhm.
good about or the resistance, and I like the no, and so I really welcome it. That seems to soften it immediately. When I say ask them, there's something really right about it. There's something intelligent here, and often that creates the space. Um, but I feel like resistance is often a part of the process, and making it intelligent and having there be an exploration of what's right about it. Often I find that that disarms it, and then there's a lot more accessibility for the person to work with their no or their bracing. Um, and I normalize a lot of the brace, like we always have that. A lot of us have that, and I have a little mantra that I say that I teach them about I am the space, not the brace. And so sometimes that seems to help create some leavening so that there can be just little sips of, like you said, Allison, what is it they're resisting, and then being with the resistance, um, just and with inquiry and presence.
Mm.
I don't know, Kristin, you're in that class. What is
Well,
it that
I'm just listening to both of you, and the question that comes up in terms of this is like, why do we work with resistance? What is it about resistance that is valuable to bring curiosity to? And there's the phrase from embryology, and I think it was from Jaap van der Waal, or in terms of I'm trying to remember, like growth.
no growth?
No growth without resistance. And so there's something about how do we, as practitioners, how do we, as individuals with others, actually recognize that there's a reason why the resistance is there, and how do we honor that? Because there's something when there's resistance there and it's reflected, whether it's through the acknowledgement that you're talking about, Kate, or honoring the no that we talk about in the principle of choice, or just meeting it in a way, it can really reflect. I feel like the power or the strength or the choice or just where we are in relationship to maybe a concept or an idea or to a person, that when that is reflected, it brings something else possible to be expressed and to be seen. And so I think with what you're saying, Kate, and with what you're saying, Allison, that just helps us connect to ourselves in our expression. And when it's met, it allows us to then also be in relationship to whatever it is that we're resisting. And opening up maybe another option to move forward, or another way that we can access the energy that's caught in that resistant response. Yeah. I think my experience of just really being met or having that space in that resistance really opens me up to something new, either in relationship to my own like vigor or vitality or boundary, or it makes me think of how, a lot of times you hear a lot in terms of parenting when someone is really feeling a bit out of control, and if someone can just like hold them, not to constrain them, but to just meet the energy that's wanting to be expressed, that when they're met in just the right way, that the child or the person starts to then melt into like, oh, now I feel held. In what's trying or has been trying to be expressed for however long. Yeah.
Well, I'm really appreciating listening to you all. And I'm really hearing that there are kind of two different things we're talking about resistance. One is an adaptive response to our history, which is like the bracing. And then there's also resistance that we're able to give someone to actually help them feel themselves, to give resistance. And they're both kind of the same energies of whether we're doing it ourselves in an adaptive way or whether then in the group work, we can give resistance more intentionally. It's really such a powerful tool for helping someone feel themselves. And I know for myself in working with a client or even in my own personal life, I can feel how resistance brings up my own adaptive behaviors. And there's like in the unconscious state, there's kind of an unconscious beginning to fight resistance. And so part of it is like, how do I soften in myself? How do I see what's happening in my own adaptive structure? And then make the intentional choice to actually see, as all of you are saying, that this adaptive response of resistance is actually a healthy response, a healthy adaptive behavior. And in supporting someone who's working with intentionally to update that, to kind of find a new way of being in their life, that really appreciating how that resistance really served them. But maybe somebody wants to explore how to move through their life in a straight line. And so that's that play of how to become friends with it and also find something new that's emerging. And I know for myself from just having experienced my dad in the hospital for a very long period of time, I was constantly having to be very protective of his expressions of resistance as expressions of health and strength, and to actually create protection around that, to really support his and reflect that resistance as a sign of his health reemerging. So, yeah, resistance there's so much strength in it. And, there really is a question of how to make it our friend and work with it and help other people do that.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation around just the positive approach towards resistance as a sign of health. I mean, I love what Ray Castellino taught us about dynamic creative opposition as a way to energize the resistance so that you have, your body and someone else's body coming up against each other and energizing that resistance, bringing it really into the present moment and getting an awareness of it just by another person meeting you there, which I've experienced. Each of you mention how powerful that is to have someone meet you in that resistance and mirror that resistance. I mean, I've seen it at the Beba clinic when we work with kids. It's so empowering when they can come up and come against it and really express themselves and get into it and make sounds, and we mirror back and make the sounds with them, and the resistance becomes something that we play out, and it becomes fun, and we mirror back how positive it is and how how powerful this child is in that resistance and expression of it. And then just working with babies, how they get a sense of themselves from feeling their body come up against your body. And as they tell their birth story, the little bit of resistance we give them in each micro movement that they do to tell their story brings the story out into the open. So resistance really is, a gift in a way. It's a positive opportunity. And I love, how we're talking about it and bringing that perspective to it, rather than being something we have to fight or break down or break through, because I feel like that just tightens it up even more. It gives the resistance a reason to stay unconscious and resisting.
Yeah.
Rather than enjoying it and being in a positive relationship with it.
Yeah, I like how you're describing it and how it ties into what Eileen was also just saying, resistance, both in the expression of it and the in the meeting of it. And the word you just used is the difference between fighting versus meeting. Like, how do we, like, when that resistance is there, how do we honor and meet it and acknowledge it so that it can I don't want to say transform, but we can access the energy that's actually in the health of it, of why it's there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think what comes up for me even now is kind of the healthy expression of resistance at a 2-year-old developmental stage of no and mine, and again, it's an energy that we collectively haven't learned to be friends with, that there are a lot of projections and judgments that are placed on that. But really, in a healthy sense, resistance is even me defining my edges and feeling where I end and somebody else begins. And I mean, they're just, as you were talking about, Alison, this what Ray Castellino taught us. I mean, even a birth, like coming through the birth canal offers resistance. So there are so many ways in which resistance has healthy expression, and then how that kind of gets interrupted, and then there are certain adaptive ways we're still finding that resistance, but in a different way that maybe as an adult then we want to update, or working with kids or babies. How do we update that now we're safe and we're actually seeking healthy resistance?
Well, and that resistance continues. I mean, it's a developmental process. So we talk about it from embryology or as a 2-year-old, but with that statement of no growth for that resistance, it's just that I liked how you just said about our edges. It helps us know where our edges are. And in knowing our edges, we can then grow. When they're met and we can feel them, we can grow. If we don't know where those edges are, if it's not met, then it's harder to actually grow in that direction or grow in a place. So, yeah.
I'm really feeling how resistance helps us in our self-awareness on every level. Through the birth process, physically, emotionally, spiritually, there's that sense of resistance that we come up against, and then have an experience of ourselves as a result of that resistance.
Yeah, and how that's met.
Yeah. And being with them and with that resistance, a person feels, I don't know, I find they feel respected, they feel received, and they feel like it's not a pathological thing that they're doing. And I find that that even down regulates the resistance to the point where we can really work with it in a way so that something else happens, something often really big and enjoyable where they were resisting embracing before. So, and I also just like to hear like the applications of it all. Like, especially Eileen, you were saying you felt protective of your father's resistance in the hospital, where I'm sure that if a patient resists there, they can often get kind of pushed back against. But it's it's nice to hear these applications and help people who are listening out there realize that it's a good thing to have it and we can work with it in good ways to help you grow.
I was actually, I was actually very moved in one of the big moments of resistance for my father, where he pulled out all his tubes after a big surgery and decided to walk out of the hospital. There was a physical therapist who just sat with him and then walked with him, as he was going through that and just tending to him and allowing that expression. And so, yeah, there were lots of times where there were people who got more oppositional with it, but there were also moments where people really, in some way, connected with something healthy happening and being with him in that act of resistance, which was very moving for me and so life affirming.
Does this feel like a good place to complete for now?
It does.
Okay. All right. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.